Welcome back to the Culture Podcast. We have Dileep Thazhmon COO and co-founder of PowerInbox, which is a digital monetization platform for the top media publishers. You want to just elaborate a little bit more for the people what PowerInbox is doing?
Sure. So what we try to do at PowerInbox is we try to provide media publishers with the ability to monetize their own properties for their own audience without going through like a walled garden. And when I say walled garden, I mean something like a Facebook or a Google, where if you use them for traffic and for advertising, they take a significant cut. So let's say you're CNN, for instance, and you have an audience and a built-in newsletter that you've kind of cultivated over the years. We allow you the ability to monetize your existing newsletter with your own ads to your own audience, and we provide the infrastructure for that, the targeting. The best way to think of it is like what Google does on the web, we do outside of the web inside email.
Right. Awesome. And you guys are growing like crazy. You're on every list, Deloitte, Inc.,
Crains.
You're on every fastest growing company. How are you dealing with this growth right now? It's 100% growth in the past 3 years.
It's well, not just growth, we're also profitable, which for a startup,
that's most important, right?
It's fairly unique for a venture-backed startup to be actually cash flow positive, especially at this stage. So that's something as a company we've focused on pretty significantly, which is just the unit economics of every dollar we bring in, we need to make sure it actually sustains the business.
Right.
The growth, honestly, we try to provide a product that sells itself. I mean, one of the big selling points of our product is we are actually paying the publisher. So to use our product, we send you a check. So that makes it a much simpler selling process than you need to be paying us. So that's one of the main ideas about it. And then our organization is flat, and you still talk to me if there's some issue with you as a customer. And we try to maintain that even though we have 600 different publishers. So I think that's a big selling point. We are hiring pretty significantly for these different roles. We've brought in, folks to look after kind of the algorithm teams and revenue operations and sales, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a big part of our growth strategy, is bringing in talent and kind of making sure they fit with the culture of the company. And this is something I've learned, honestly, as the company has matured and as I've kind of, continued my career, is it's okay to not solve all the problems like ASAP. I feel like that's a big part of our culture and a big part of like startup life, it's, hey, let's fix this, let's get the next thing in. Sometimes when you don't fix it, you actually see larger trends. Like, again, you got to be, pick your fires, don't let every fire, burn. But sometimes you see things that actually lead to revelations later, right? So, for instance, two functions that are not working well together, right? The instinct as a founder is like, I'll just do it. Like, that's a very normal instinct. It's like, I'll just do it. But, empower the people that are the owners of those functions to figure that out. Because that pays its dividends much later than that instinct of like, I need to go fix that. That's very hard. It's very, very hard to do that. It's very hard to kind of let that kind of component, go. And, it's something you need to train yourself just like anything else. So PowerInbox is fairly unique in the sense we do have two main offices. So we have an office in New York and we have an office in Israel. But we have a lot of people that work remotely.
Right.
And remote working is a very interesting concept because a lot of people think that's going to be awesome. And it is awesome if you're used to it and if you really want to put in the effort to get, remote working done. It's not as easy as just waking up every day and doing your work from home, because you need to kind of get into a habit for that. And so we have hired people where that hasn't worked out all the time.
Right.
But what we've also learned is people that actually value remote working, it's a significant hiring advantage, because especially a lot of our employees, they are married, they have kids, they enjoy the work-life balance we can provide. And that's a significant hiring advantage for us to be able to hire a really smart computer scientist in Louisiana that Google might not be going after.
Right.
So it is ingrained in our DNA. But then the other side is you need to know how to communicate within that scenario, how to use different tools, how to get on the meetings on times. We really pride ourselves on because we're so remote, on having a fast response time. And I think a lot of that comes from the founders of the company, but it's also interesting to see how that's now part of the DNA of how we respond to customers. So you can send, if you send me an email, you probably get a response back in 30 minutes. Like, it's quick because that's part of the culture we brought up in the company. And I think one of the big things that I've learned kind of tied to this is, as a company, and when you're a company that's growing we started with 3 people, and we're close to about 50 now. So as a company, and when you grow from 3 to 50 people, you kind of have to pick what your company is going to be good at each stage. You're not going to be good at everything. So in the beginning, if product is key, get that down, build the site, build the product, make sure it's, like sticky paper, everyone comes in stages. When you're growing, it might not be product, it might be marketing. You might have a different function that you have to be good at. And that changes. So I think one of the things a lot of startups try to do is they try to be good at everything. And obviously that's fantastic, but that's next to impossible. And what you sacrifice is you're not really good at one thing. Mm-hmm. So sales is interesting. And it's one thing to be a strategy consultant, which I was, mm-hmm. And it's another to be actually like selling day to day, because that is, the difference between your company making it to the next year or not. Very, very different scenarios. I think one of the things I've really learned in sales, or actually a couple of things. One thing is like you kind of need to have a connection with the person you're selling. Okay. Right? Now, connection isn't everything. Like no one's going to buy your product if it's crap. Like it doesn't matter what connection you have, no one's actually going to buy it if it's not a great product. So that's there, but to get the first step to be like, hey, this is someone I want to keep doing business with, you should be, basically someone that they want to do business with. It sounds as simple as possible, but the flip side, and I see this all the time because I get inbounds all the time, is like, why should I be talking to you? Just like when I reach out to someone at CNN, I try to get to that point as soon as possible, right? It's like, hey, this is why this is useful. If they don't respond, they don't respond. Respect that. Like, move on. Like, for me, I think one of the most annoying parts in the sales process is when someone's reaching out to you 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. It's like, we got the first email. We got the first 3 emails, right? So they know you're there. They know what you're doing. And they'll reach back out to you. And that's happened many, many times, which is, you can drop a note every quarter, every 3, 4 months, be like, hey, just checking in. And we've had clients that have come back to us a year later and be like, hey, so, want to tell me about this, our contract's coming up, like, what do you guys actually have, right? So it's kind of keeping that channel open, but then also being someone that's, and this is the balance between like not being too pushy and then also finding some actual value. Some of the best clients and deals we've had are people that, like I've reached out to them, I've met them, we're actually friends, independent of the fact that like a year and a half later, they actually did a deal. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, no, this is someone I actually just want to hang out with. And that helps a lot. And I think a lot of people, don't focus as much on that side. It's much more on just the numbers, which is great. And, sales lives and dies on the numbers. But without building that pipeline or investing in that pipeline, it's very hard to have a sales structure that can mature. And I think that's what a lot of people in sales, at least from my experience, don't focus on.
You talked about the raising of the capital and the money. That's probably, I think that is a big hurdle for a lot of companies. How did you navigate that field, and how did you get to that next step of?
Well, my personal feeling, and this is coming as someone that also does, seed investing, is if you can do it without capital, do it without capital. Right. It's so much better, right? It's interesting to me how raising capital is like almost like a flag that you made it, when like reality you're just getting a mortgage. Like no one's happy when you get a mortgage for your house, so why are you so happy? It's like you're basically like gave up equity for someone. Like it's not something to be that proud of, right? So if you can do it without it, you should absolutely do it. But sometimes it's a trade-off. You're trading off resources for growth, and what you're saving is time, and like you get to market much faster. So you really have to judge, what it is that you're providing and whether you need capital for it. Actually, for startups, one of the biggest mistakes is taking in too much capital, because then you can't actually grow in a successful manner year after year. And so what we did when we did our second and third round of funding is we really, really focused on the unit economics. Like we wanted to make sure, one, on a per dollar basis, the company is moving towards profitability, and we hit profitability last year. So we really, really focused on making sure that was core to what we're doing. And then 2, you kind of control your own destiny at that point. We don't need to take any more funding, if we don't want to. And that's a big advantage. It gives us a competitive advantage to other players in the space that might have a lot of funding and are not profitable.
Let's leave off with words to live by, maybe a favorite quote or saying you got.
I've seen this, especially with starting a company. Like a lot of times people talk about risk, right? Which is like you're taking risks to start a company. It's a huge risk. I mean, you're giving up income. You're basically trying to hope it works, etc. But there's also a risk for not doing it, which is when you get older, you have that thing of, hey, did I try this? Did I not? Like I should have. So people see risk as resource, but there's also a risk for time and, your thought process, which changes over time. And I read this one thing, which was, I don't remember who it was, but it was a very simple quote. It was a lot of people exists, very few people live. And I like, for me, that kind of like stuck, because it's like, yeah, like you think you're doing what you need to do, but like, is it what you need to do? And everyone's got a different answer. It doesn't mean, quit your job tomorrow and run and go start a company. It could become something much more mundane, but just try that thing that you want to try. That's all.
It's awesome. Go out there and live, right?
Don't exist, just live.